I'm your host, Lori Sartino, here at the Serious Play Conference in Redmond, Washington with Ross Smith from Microsoft. Hi, Ross.
Hello. How are you, Lori?
Good. How are you?
Good,
so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
We touched base early on with the topic of the future of work from the work that I've done leading up to this conference and leading up to this part of my life. And you had already written a paper called The Future of Work is Play.
Yes.
Let's hear more about that.
All right. Well, kind of a little background on me. I'm the director of test for a product called Microsoft Link, which is an audio-video web conferencing application inside of Office. And we have been experimenting with the use of what we call productivity games for several years now, many, many years, and had lots of tremendous success, some spectacular failures as well, and lessons learned. But it's intrigued me to kind of continue this exploration to understand the impact and influence of play in the workplace. And so, you know, in a lot of our work we see multicultural generation differences, we see work style differences, and from a test perspective, all of that is tremendously valuable, right? That if you do the same thing over and over again, bugs get harder to find, right? You end up training the software to pass your tests and don't necessarily capture the hardest defects to find. But if you have a really diverse population using a variety of techniques, you end up finding bugs sooner and more efficiently and effectively. And so Harry Markowitz in the 50s came up with sort of the balanced portfolio or portfolio distribution theory, which is essentially balancing your 401k. You reduce risk by diversifying your investments. And so the same thing is really true in testing. And so the idea of games here is that we want lots of different people to try our software, but it doesn't always work. And so if you're making an important phone call on a pre-release version of our software and the call drops because of a bug, you know, the Link test team says, all right, way to go. Well, you may not be quite as happy as we are that you found that bug because you got disconnected in your phone call. So if we can wrap that experience in the game in a playful environment, then you're more likely to experiment and help us out. And so that's sort of the broad overview. But in thinking about sort of the bigger picture, if we go back to sort of early civilization, there's a great story around the Great Pyramid of Giza, where on the stones there's markings for the friends of Menkaure, who was a pharaoh, and the celebrants, drunkards of Menkaure. And the theory, or at least some of the research, suggests that they competed to haul stones up. Some question whether it was competition or whether it was extrinsic or intrinsic motivation, but either way there was some competition. They competed apparently for beer and food and celebrations at the end of each day. And so so that kind of got us thinking, and okay, when you think back to these early civilizations, people play and leisure, games, recreation was just part of survival, right? You were out hunting and fishing. You didn't go hunting and fishing for recreation. You did it to get food. Athletic competitions, you know, the Greek runner at marathon delivering messages, and so there wasn't really a need for recreation, so to speak, the way we think of it today. And you kind of go through and you think about the colonial farm and children maybe playing games to learn how to be adults. But then the industrial age comes along, and you know, the sort of mechanization of life. So you have urbanization, you have now the machine governing the work. When the Bessemer steel arm comes down and the steel's being poured, you're not choosing whether you take a break right then or not. Like, you have to work. And so the pace of work is governed now by the machine, or the assembly line is moving along and you're assembling parts. There's no opportunity to kind of, well, let me take a break and, you know, do something leisurely. You're governed by the machine. And interestingly, so when you think and look at the sort of inventions and advances of the industrial age, you have things like the time clock, the organizational chart, just the idea of a boss, factory, things like the assembly line, a lot of the production machines, Frederick W. Taylor and Schmidt, the modern man, the high-priced man, and a lot of effort into changing the way work was done. And so a lot of that was very good. We got a lot of great advances in society at that time. But what was interesting in looking at this, there was also probably the richest period of advances in recreation. So the national park system was founded during that time. State and municipal parks came into play. Things like the traveling circus, theaters, bars, the idea of entertainment, the camera, the phonograph. A lot of these same leisure activities came. The urban playground, the Boston Sand Garden was the first urban playground. And so the idea of now is sort of here's scheduled recreation.
So these are evidence, evidence of this shift.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. And so now if we think about the workplace today and certainly the future of work, in 1959 in his book Landmarks of Tomorrow, Peter Drucker coined the term knowledge worker. And so now we've shifted, in many cases, not every case, but in a lot of cases, we've shifted or are shifting to knowledge work versus physical work. And so our premise, our idea here is, okay, now it's time to reintroduce play back into the workplace because, if you're thinking about something really hard, it helps to take a break and play solitaire, because you kind of get out of that focused mindset and there's all kinds of studies on creative thinking on how, the best ideas come in the shower because you're not focused and the brain synapses connect in different ways when you're not focused on the problem, or you get great ideas in your sleep. So the idea of bringing play into the workplace actually enhances the productivity, the creativity, and the innovation of today's knowledge worker.
Yes, and what we're hearing at the conference, right, with everybody that we're sitting here with, is the challenge in doing that, the difference between having it be a choice versus bringing it in, when there isn't a choice. And we can also go back to kind of what you mentioned as the industrial age came along, and what was one of the other things that really helped people have a common ground when we went to war and brought so many people into the factories. It didn't matter so much that this wasn't really the job that they wanted to do. We came together as a country, so there was that kind of a common ground that brought us together. So now that we're in this other place, and we're talking about, there is going to be an organic shift to play coming back into how we work together. I'm hearing, and I'm wondering if you're also hearing kind of some of these side conversations about gamification, and it's just not the right way to do it. And talk about that a little bit and how this looks at Microsoft and what your view is on that.
Well, the term gamification, you get a lot of mixed results from game aficionados, and it's, my view is, there's a right way and a wrong way to use games. Games can be very motivating, right? And people play constantly, and for everyone checking their phone for the Farmville update, or Angry Birds or whatever. But where we've learned the most there is where you use games matters a lot. We have traditional, paychecks, a human resource process to management and all kinds of sort of institutional processes to improve and augment and enhance the way we work. And when you take a game or game mechanics and put it right on top of that, it's confusing to the individual. So the way I describe this best is, if I roll out the Do Ross's Job game and we get 100 people to play the Do Ross's Job game, and I come in like 18th, I probably have a weird conversation with my manager, like, hey, you came in 18th at your own job. Like, and so I'm feeling kind of emotional about the Do Ross's Job game. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Netflix prize, but they, a few years ago, several years ago, Netflix put out $1 million prize for the best recommendation algorithm. And I always thought, okay, whoever had the job of doing the recommendation algorithm before probably wasn't a big fan of the Netflix prize, right? And certainly I think it was a team of 5 scientists won it. Certainly they were pretty enthused, but the person whose job that was probably thinking, okay, my job just became a contest for the rest of the world. And that's sort of where I think gamification can go awry. performance.
And I did a blog post not too long ago about this concept of how can I make my job obsolete, or how can we make our company obsolete? And just that as a way of looking at the whole picture and try to take yourself and your emotion out of it and looking at it like that.
It's there's some interesting, and so where we've actually seen tremendous results is we have developed this sort of matrix where it's based on the work of Elizabeth Smith, who has defined skills into 3 categories, which you would say is the columns here. Your core skills, things that most everybody in the organization has. Unique skills are the things that I'm paid for. Expanding skills, things I can learn to do better in my job. And then the 2 rows we have are in-role behaviors, things that I do every day as part of my job, and then organizational citizenship behaviors, which are behaviors that I can do that make the organization better, but are not necessarily part of my job. So I help a neighbor with a problem, or I clean the coffee pot at the end of the day in the kitchen. And where we found games are tremendously effective are sort of the corners here, or I guess if I'm looking that way, the corners here. But your core skills for citizenship behaviors and your expanding skills for in-role behaviors. So the expanding one's easy. That's training games. Games that I can play and I can learn the language, I can learn how to type, I can learn how to use pivot tables, whatever it is, I can play these games and get better at my job. Where we've seen a lot of success for the type of skills that we are trying to recruit is these core skills for citizenship behaviors. Hey, we did a game a while back called, creatively named the Language Quality Game, which was to help encourage native language speakers to assess the quality of the Windows translation effort. And so we had roughly 4,000 players from inside Microsoft review over 500,000 screens. And where it was really beneficial is some of the more obscure languages, we would have a handful of native language speakers who are very passionate about making sure that that language goes back to their native country in good shape. So that idea of, hey, let me help out the Windows team. I may be in marketing or product support or somewhere like that, but let me take some time to help out the Windows team because I know my parents, my friends, my relatives are going to be using this version of the product, so I want to take a little extra time and help out. And then we added a little bit of whimsy, so it was kind of fun to do, and people could circle errors, and then and they could see the process change. They could see if they made a recommendation. It was very transparent, so they could see the product change. So that idea of citizenship behavior, of helping out, is a really powerful one. You want to do it in a core skills area because otherwise you may not have many players, right? So if we do, if Ross is really good at cleaning the coffee pot and he's the only one who's good at it, designing a game to have him clean a coffee pot doesn't really matter because he's the only one playing. You could just ask him instead of building a game. But where you have core skills, you have more players.